Good morning and Shabbat Shalom to everybody who is joining in all over the world, all over the nation, wherever you're watching from. I am happy that you're here, and we have a lot to talk about and get into. We are on a series talking about Abram and the separation of Abram from his kinship and from his people as he is moving on into God's purpose in his life. And we're going to see in his journey how Abram has dealt with toxicity even on till now. Now, before I get into this message, I do want to let you all know, because some people have asked in the past about being able to donate. First of all, donations are not a requirement. Donations are not required, but they are inspired. So if you are inspired to donate, there are a couple of options. One on the banner of the Royal We Fellowship on the channel up above. You can find a donate a button there. In addition to that, I did go ahead and put a donate link again for those of you who are inspired to do so in the chat. So you can scroll up and probably find that donate link there. Now, moving on into today's message, we are following along in the journey of Abram as he has moved away from his kinship, from his family. And this was what was required of him in order to be blessed in his life. The Lord had spoken to Abram and said, leave your father's house, leave your parents, leave your culture behind you, leave everything, get up and go to where I am going to bless you and bless you beyond your wildest imaginations. Now, a lot of us would love to be blessed beyond our wildest imaginations. However, a lot of us struggle with this concept of leaving what we hold on to so dearly, leaving our culture, leaving behind our parents, our family. A lot of us are so enmeshed and it's so ingrained that we are one with our family, we are one with that particular tribe, that we leave ourselves in a position where it's very difficult as individuals to discover who we are and our own sovereign independence and abilities. And it's very difficult for that to happen. And in which case, it's very difficult to be used by a higher power. It's very difficult to be used by God, for those of you who want to be used by God, when you have so many attachments to your past and to your lineage. Now, Abram struggled with being completely and fully obedient, and we've seen this, that up to this point, that he did leave his family and his culture, kind of. He ultimately ended up taking his nephew Lot. Now, is that leaving behind his entire culture and his family to move on to what God has? No, not at all. He brought with him some of the culture. He brought with him some of his family. He brought with him what he just could not let go of. And it proved to be costly, and it proved to be a stumbling block in his journey to receiving everything that God had in store for him. Now, we've already talked about in the last messages how they got to a certain point to where even Abram and Lot, his nephew, started to argue, and the people who were with Lot and the people who were with Abram started to fight. Toxicity grew between the two groups because there just wasn't enough room. And so as a result, Abram in the situation said, Lot, there's no reason for us to fight. There's no reason for us to argue. You go your way and I'll go mine. Now, if you were in the last message, you'll know that this is a very appropriate way for you and I to be able to handle toxic relationships. It's kind of along the lines of allowing toxic narcissists to win in the situation. We simply state that the obvious facts. The obvious facts are we are not getting along. You go your way, I'll go mine. Whatever you choose to do. And in this type of response, we are allowing them to feel like they are winning in the situation. And ultimately, what typically happens is narcissists or people who are more interested in themselves will take what looks like the high road. They will take what looks like the path to the most beautiful thing. They will take the shiny new relationship. They will take the shiny new toys. They will take everything that looks on the outside to be good. And in the situation with Abram and Lot, it's no different. Lot chose the most beautiful looking area before them both, which was Sodom. And obviously, we all know the story that's about to happen about Sodom and Gomorrah. We're not there yet. So nobody saw the toxicity within Sodom, but from initially they saw that Sodom was beautiful. It says it looked like the garden of the Lord. All right. And Lot said, I want that. Okay. If you want to separate, that's fine. I want that. I want the most for me and my people. I want to be in the most beautiful place. Abram's response to that was something that you and I need to pay attention to. Abram's trust was not in what his eyes can see or with what Lot was even boasting about. Abram's trust was in the Lord and in the promise that the Lord had given him and on the path, no matter what it looked like in that certain situation. So Abram watched Lot walk away into Sodom, probably scratching his head, going, that's kind of not fair because Lot's going into this beautiful looking place. And Abram had to turn around and look at the desert areas that surrounded him. But now the Lord instructed Abram, he said, listen, walk, Abram, just walk. Turn away from Lot. Don't look at him. Walk the perimeter of everything else that's around you. I know it looks like desert, but walk it, get used to it, get comfortable with it, because this is where I'm going to make your descendants as many as the stars in heaven. I'm going to bless you beyond your wildest imagination in this emptiness that you see. And so Abram had to pay close attention to that, and he had to be diligent and do exactly what was being told, which was to turn his back from Lot, allow Lot to take what looked like the better situation, and walk around the perimeter, the width, the depth of this area, this desert that God said, this is where I'm going to bless you. All right. Now then, we're going to pick up now, after Abram departed from his nephew Lot, who chose to go to Sodom, the most beautiful looking place in there, Abram had to start focusing on the promises of God. He had to start focusing on the promises of God rather than the beauty of what was surrounding Lot. This is important for you and I to understand coming out of toxic, narcissistic relationships. Many of you need to hear this. We need to start focusing on the promises in our lives and the responsibilities in our lives and stop looking towards what looks like a better end of the deal for toxic people who we've had to send away from our lives, who we are going no contact from, who we are separating from. Okay, this is important. Just checking real quick. All right, making sure everybody can hear me. All right, so what they did not realize, neither one of them, but they did not realize in that separation was that there was trouble brewing in paradise, so to speak. There was trouble brewing right away in Sodom that neither one of them were prepared for, and they didn't know about it. Listen, this is important for you and I to understand, too, that even when toxic people who we're trying to separate from in our lives, they're moving on to something that seems to be so much more beautiful. We don't see the trouble in that. Listen, the grass always looks greener on the other side. You and I have heard this before, but the reality is it's only greener and nicer until you step in a pile of dog poop, right? Because there's dog poop and landmines and things in all areas of all walks of life. Obviously, in toxic relationships, they want to pick what looks the best. They want to go after what looks the best, and they want to hide the fact that they're stepping in poop all along the way. So do not take that take it with a grain of salt, right? And here we get into right away some issues with Lot and entering into Sodom. And because Lot was with Abram, it now becomes Abram's issues as well. Because of the bond, because of the trauma bond, if you will, because of the brotherly bond, because of all kinds of issues that are phenomenons in our life, the same issues that you and I wrestle with, where it's very difficult to let people go who are a part of your life. This again gets into the idea and the concept that when Abram was instructed to leave his entire family, his lineage, and his culture, he should have listened. He should have walked away, but he didn't. He held on to his nephew Lot, and as a result, he got dragged into all this trouble that Lot was causing or was in or was dragged into as well. So let's check out what's going on here in Sodom right away. The trouble that was brewing in paradise in Genesis chapter 14. That's where we're going to start today. Genesis chapter 14. The nearby kings of different regions of the area went out to war against Sodom. So little did Lot and Abram know that the surrounding kings and the surrounding areas wanted to attack Sodom. They wanted to wage their war against Sodom. And so this long war takes place. And war was not uncommon back in the ancient days, just as it is now. There's wars happening all the time, all around us. Some of the big ones we know about, many of the wars that take place, we never even know about as we live in this pretty, what we believe is protected bubble of the United States or, some of the surrounding nations. But there are always wars taking place. It was no different back in this time. In a particular valley, it continues, Genesis 14, in a valley during a battle that Lot happened to take part in. So, being that Lot had become a man in Sodom, I would imagine that all the men that were in Sodom had to fight in these wars. Doesn't matter how long they had been there. If they were new or if they were born there, you kind of have a duty to fight for your survival, fight for your place, fight where you're at. So Lot ended up in this fight. So there's Abram out trying to, trying to receive the promises of God. And he's just working on figuring out where God's blessings are, what it's going to look like, how God is going to bless and restore his life and make him the father of many nations. And lo and behold, he does not realize it, but his nephew Lot is out fighting wars because he chose to go to what was perceived to be the most beautiful land, Sodom. So with his choice, with Lot's choice, with the choice of toxicity that takes no counsel of other people, that takes nothing else into consideration, just jumping at the first most beautiful sight, it's a trap. It's a trap. This is for you and I to know this. We need to understand that things, when we just look at it and it looks beautiful, could be a trap. So while Abram is walking the desert and being one in communion with the Lord, Lot ends up in this beautiful place, but is at war as he's fighting, and he's part of an army now. He's part of these men who are fighting. And neither one of them saw that coming. Now, the king of Sodom and the allies, still in Genesis 14 here. King of Sodom and their allies were driven out, and they retreated from a particular valley where they were having a battle, leaving behind, they were driven out to the point of this, where they left behind, and they left behind possessions, they left behind their war tools, their weapons, they left behind food, and they left behind people. It said that there were pits and things like that in this particular valley. People were falling into them. Guess who fell into one of the pits in the valley during the battle that Sodom was in? None other than Lot, of course. Lot happened to fall into a pit amongst other people. He was trapped. He was captured by the enemies. He was captured by the other kings, and he was taken away, most likely to be a slave. So there was Lot, who was in a battle because he chose what looked to be the best. He ended up in a war, fell into a pit, and is now enslaved to some form of enemy kings and whatever. Now, people who escaped the war and the battle, who were with Lot, they remembered where Abram was, because these were people who were with Lot at the time when they used to be together. And so they ran and they caught up with Abram, and they found Abram, and they told him. It says in Genesis 14, verse 13, a man who had escaped came and reported this to Abram, the Hebrew. Now, this is interesting. So Abram just found out that his nephew Lot was involved in a war, was involved in battle, and has now been captured, and has been seized and is enslaved. Wow. Talk about raining on your parade. How many of you have tried to get out of toxic situations and you've had news hit you? Sometimes it seems like the toxic people are moving on and doing great things, but how many of you have heard things where it sounds like they're getting into more trouble? This, by far, is probably the worst scenario that you can imagine. Now, Abram I believe, felt a need to do something about it, but I don't believe he rushed out to do anything about it. I'm sure Abram went through many of the emotions that you and I would. How many of you would like to actually see toxic people that you have dealt with in life get captured, right? Go through torture, go through torment. Good. I'm glad they fell into a pit, and I'm glad they were seized, and I hope they get everything back in life. I'm willing to bet most of us at some point think we would like to think that way. Kind of out of sight, out of mind. Not my choice anymore. Has nothing to do with me. They made their choice. And in all honesty, we are to have this mentality when it comes to dealing with toxic people in our lives, people who are narcissistically abusive. We let them go. We let them go, live their life according to their own choice. Abram was in this position too. He was facing he wanted to move on and find the blessings of God, right? Allow the other people to make their own choices. Okay. But something happened over a period of time. Now, it doesn't say that Abram rushed out right away. We don't know how much time went by. Okay. But Abram started to wrestle with the strings of being pulled to do something about it and to help his nephew Lot. Now, many of us in situations with toxic people also from time to time feel the need that we can offer some kind of assistance or help in toxic relationships. Perhaps you're dealing with a toxic mother, a toxic father of yours, and it's very difficult for you to just shut them out completely, especially if you know that they need help. How many of you are in that situation? And I believe that Abram found himself in this particular situation. Did he need to help? No. Do you need to help in this situation? No. But for some reason, your heartstrings are still tugged to do something. This is where we get into this concept and this idea of agape. And I believe that although Abram should never have been in the situation because he never should have brought Lot with him, his disobedience of being enmeshed in a relationship when God told him to leave his father's house and to leave everything behind, his disobedience caused this enmeshment, right? This is a result of yours and mine, and a lot of times our disobedience when we go back to relationships, when we bring people we should not be bringing with our lives, when we get enmeshed in relationships we should not be enmeshed in. And so as a result, he's in this place now where he's contemplating about how he can possibly do something to help Lot in the situation. And as he's thinking about it, he stumbles upon, and it's not spoken in this, but I believe it's the first illustration of agape. Agape, rather, is the form of love that we are to have towards other people. When we talk about the word love, and I've talked about this on Organic Royal We uploads, we really have this misconception of love. Love is a formless word that we use. It can mean anything. Right? You realize this, that even abusive people use the word love. They say they love you while they really don't act like it. Okay, so love is a very messy word in our culture. Back then, they had different concepts and principles that they acted from. It wasn't a word love that they used. It was a word such as agape, which was a principle. It's a way in which they showed something. Now, agape is the same love, if you will, that Jesus has for people. It's a love in which you don't need anything from the other people. You're doing a generous act of kindness. You're doing what's virtuous. You're doing what's right, no matter what, despite what other people do. And I believe that what we're seeing here is Abram wrestling with this principle and this idea of agape, of making the right choice to help Lot, his nephew, while not needing him and not needing anything from him. And this is something that you and I need to start to understand and receive into our lives so that we can actually coexist with narcissistic people, because many of us have a hard time coexisting with the idea that people are toxic and narcissistic because we don't fully understand agape. But Abram is wrestling with this very same thing. He's going to understand agape, and he's going to show us exactly what living out in agape looks like. So agape as we said, it's a form of non-reciprocating love. It's a form of non-reciprocating action where we do something not because we need anything, but simply because we know in our hearts that it's something we can do. Okay? It's not going over and beyond something we can't do. It's simply doing what we are able to do and what we know we can do. As a certain amount of time went by, Abram, we're still in Genesis 14 here. Abram gathered some men and he pursued where the kings had taken his nephew Lot after they captured him. All right. Now then, Genesis 14:16. Abram did what he had to do along with the men to recover the goods and the people captured by the other kings. And he brought back his relative Lot, his possessions, together with the women and the other people. So, yes, Abram went off to fight. And in Genesis 14, you can see how they did that. They went about at nighttime, snuck in, uh, fought whoever they had to fight, took back the possessions, took back Lot. It was about 318 men, trained men, it says, that Abram took with him. Abram met a lot of these people in this new area that he was living in. Okay, he gained their trust. They became a community, much like the Royal We community, as if all of us right now were to go after somebody who has been lost and we were to all go and to bring that person back. That's exactly what it looked like with Abram. He went, he brought back all of the possessions that were stolen, taken by those kings, as well as his nephew Lot, and as well as the women, everybody that they took captive. So Abram ultimately saved the day by bringing back Lot. Now, this is an image of agape. He went into a place because he could. He was able, he had the resources, he had the community, and he was able to offer help. Was it risky and dangerous? Yes, but this is where Abram trusted the Lord. And now this trust is also based on agape. Abram went into the situation not needing anything. He did not go after Lot because he needed Lot in his life. Do you understand me? This is the most important thing that we can talk about. Abram did not go get his nephew Lot because Abram needed Lot. Abram knew that Lot should never have probably been there from the get-go. Abram came to this place of agape, which is acting out without needing anything from the other person. Abram did not need Lot. That is not why he went after Lot. Abram went to rescue Lot and the people because he saw a wrong that was taking place, and he did what he could do based on the Lord's instructions to resolve that issue. And now watch this. We're going to see even more how agape works in your life, in my life, as it worked in Abram's life. Abram did out of agape, out of the rewardless act of kindness. And it's important to understand that it's rewardless. Like Jesus. Jesus's acts of kindness were rewardless. This is the first image of this. Abram displayed this. Jesus was at war. He was constantly walking out teaching as he was being harassed and ridiculed by Pharisees, by Sadducees. He was healing people, and he did not take for him any rewards. It was a very rewardless act that we see in the New Testament of Jesus. This is what Abram was displaying, that same rewardless act, which is called agape. It's the action that is agape, that is the right kind of love, and you and I need to understand this form of rewardless love, not so we can be taken advantage of, but so that we can choose in our own steadfastness and righteousness and our virtue where we can help, and why we should help and when not to help, right? And one of the ways and one of the places we should never want to help is if we are hoping and thinking it's going to change a relationship, or if we are wanting something in return out of it. And so, Genesis 14:16 says that he recovered all the goods, brought back everything, returned it. Now, this is interesting right here, Genesis 14:17. After Abram returned from defeating those kings and all of the allies, the king of Sodom, this is the king that lost Lot, lost all the possessions. He came out to meet Abram. And they had this conversation, poured wine, had cigars. I don't know. Patted Abram on the back, brought bread, all this good stuff, right, for Abram, and said, "Wow, good job, Abram. It was all, you went out, you saved the day, you brought back our possessions, this and that." And we're going to skip down, and you can read that between Genesis 14:17 through Genesis 14:22. But we're going to just jump down to Genesis 14:22. This is where we see agape love fulfilled right here. Genesis 14, verse 22. Abram replied, okay, basically the conversation was, Abram, you brought back the people, the possessions. Abram, you're our hero. Just so give us the people so we can be our community, our kingdom again. You can have all the possessions, Abram. It could be your treasure. You deserve it for what you've done. This is where we see the fulfillment of agape and what agape truly means. Genesis 14:22. Abram replied to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand to the Lord God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will not, I'm going to say this again, I will not accept even a thread or a strap or a sandal or anything that belongs to you. Wow. The king of Sodom is saying, Abram, let me reward you. You saved my people. You saved my possessions. Let me reward you. You deserve a reward. You deserve honor. Abram said, no. I want nothing of yours. This is agape fulfilled. Do you understand? This is when you and I step into toxic relationships and they try to become your friends and your buddies and they want to say, oh, let me do this for you. And you go, no, I want nothing from you. I did not do this to help you out so I can get anything from you. Why? This is the message that you and I need to hear right now. And this one message will save us from toxic relationships and from being in a place of need. After Abram says, I raised my hand to God that I will not accept a thread or a strap or anything from you. Why? Because it says right here, lest you should say that I have made Abram rich. This right here is the warning that Abram is giving all of us about understanding our role in living out agape and how toxic relationships work. This is probably why Abram did not just rush out to get Lot, but God needed to instill these things. The Lord needed to equip Abram with this understanding. You do not go out to do things for people, to save people, to do anything in expecting a reward from those people, because they will absolutely turn around and say, we made that person rich. Yes, they saved us and this and that, but we gave them so much. And it will ultimately, in toxic relationships, be accounted back to who? The toxic people. How many of you have done great things for toxic people in your life? You served them. You served them well. You did everything you could. And you in your heart know you did. But the problem was you wanted something in return. And also you took things in return from them that they gave you, and they turned on you. And instead of being able to say you are a righteous person, they said, oh, you only did good things because I made you rich, because I gave you all this stuff. That is toxicity, and that is narcissistic abuse. That's how they turn the tables. So we are given a clear heads up and a warning here for all of us on what true agape looks like as we live our lives and we go out to do great things in this life. And yes, we will encounter toxic people. And yes, you and I will be called on in this life to be a blessing in toxic people's lives. You and I will be called on in this life to do things. We've got to get this down and be able to wrestle with this concept of agape and what it looks like as we march into these situations, knowing that we will not get anything in return out of them. And in fact, when they try to give us something in return, we have got to be able to say, no, I did not do what I did so I can receive 1 cent from you. No, I do not want you to buy me lunch. No, I do not want you to buy me dinner. No, I am not trying to get anything of yours, lest you say that you have treated me and be able to take all the glory. This is what Abram had spoken to the king of Sodom. And now watch this. Abram fulfilled that. He did not take anything from Sodom. He did not even take his nephew Lot. He sent Lot back on his way. This goes back to the concept and the principle of Abram did not rescue Lot, so Abram can be with Lot. You are not to go out and try to rescue or help toxic people so that you can be with them. Once Abram got Lot back, he gave Lot and all the possessions back to the king of Sodom and said, go back your way. So what Abram displayed out of agape was doing the right thing in a place where he can do the right thing. He was able to, and then sent them on their way without receiving anything for it. And now watch this. Abram was in the position to be blessed by God. He proved God's value and integrity and righteousness, that it was in the right place. Abram's full blessing, Abram's full confidence was in who God called him to be, and this is how he lived. A lot of you need to hear this message this morning. I know I do, and I am thankful that all of you are here. And as I said earlier, for those of you who would like to donate, again, donations are not requirement. It is not required. It is inspired. For those of you who would like to, you can donate on the banner above the Royal We channel. There is a button there. Also, I went ahead and put a link on the chat. It's at some point in there. And we will be back next Saturday for Royal We Fellowship. We're going to continue on and learn more about our role, learn more about the ancient literature and the understanding of toxic relationships and how we are to survive and live and be blessed in this world of toxicity. Thank you all for being here. Have a great weekend. Shabbat Shalom. Be blessed, and we'll be back next Saturday morning.